Hello, and welcome to the ASCO Daily News Podcast. I'm Dr. Eric Small, your guest host of this ASCO Daily News Podcast today. I'm the co-leader of the UCSF Prostate Cancer Program and Deputy Director and Chief Scientific Officer at the UCSF Helen Diller Family Comprehensive Cancer Center. This year, quite amazingly, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the ASCO Genitourinary Cancers Symposium, which is hosted annually in San Francisco. The symposium has heralded some of the biggest strides in GU oncology and has the largest multidisciplinary global audience for GU cancer research. I was honored to have a role in the development of ASCO GU 2 decades ago, along with my friends and colleagues, Dr. Eric Klein, Emeritus Professor and Chair of the Glickman Urological and Kidney Institute at the Cleveland Clinic, and Dr. Anthony Zietman, a professor of radiation oncology at Harvard Medical School and the Massachusetts General Hospital. On today's episode, we'll be reflecting on key moments in the meeting's development, its role in advancing GU cancers and GU cancer research, and major challenges that lay ahead for the field. You'll find our full disclosures in the transcript of this episode, and disclosures of all guests on the podcast are available at asco.org/DNPod. Eric and Anthony, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to catch up with you both to discuss ASCO GU. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for the invitation.
Well, it's really exciting and it was wonderful to see the two of you. So, the ASCO GU Symposium has been a key annual event for all of us in the GU field. But to give our listeners some background, when the symposium was first created, when we first met in San Francisco starting on Thursday, February 17th, 2005, it brought together 1,035 individuals interested in the prevention and treatment at that point of prostate cancer alone. At that time, the meeting was co-sponsored by ASCO, the American Society for Therapeutic Radiology and Oncology, or ASTRO, the Society of Urologic Oncology, SUO, and the Prostate Cancer Foundation. It was actually the culmination of several years of planning. Clearly, it represented the first truly multidisciplinary scientific and educational meeting dedicated solely to prostate cancer, and we'll come back to talk about that. The meeting went back and forth between San Francisco and Florida for a few years before finally settling permanently in San Francisco. In the last 20 years, ASCO and the symposium's co-sponsors expanded the meeting to include all genitourinary specialties. And this year, 2024, ASCO received more than 875 abstract submissions and anticipates that there will be even more attendees than last year. On a personal note, it's truly amazing to me that here we are, 20 years later, and the meeting is going stronger than we could ever have imagined. I must say that my motivation to help organize this meeting stemmed from two issues that were somewhat in tension with each other. First, the field of prostate cancer and prostate cancer research was just starting to take off at the time. And we really needed, as a community, a venue where across disciplines we could talk and meet with each other. But that was in real tension, at least at ASCO, where we were relegated at the annual meeting to a tiny room at the far end of the convention center on the last day of ASCO, because really that's all we could muster. And I do remember making a pitch assuring folks that there was an unmet need and that the field was going to take off. Who knew, right? So I'm wondering, and either of you can jump in, Dr. Klein, Dr. Zietman, tell us how you got involved in the first GU meeting and what's the most salient feature of your involvement. Anthony, do you want to start?
I think it's really important to discuss the historical context at which this meeting was born. Back in the 1990s, we were incredibly polarized as specialties in GU oncology. PSA had been introduced in the late 80s, early 90s. Screening was everywhere. There was a tidal wave of patients and an almost reckless race to treatment. All surgeons believed that all patients with localized early prostate cancer needed surgery and that they could do individually a beautiful job. And all radiation oncologists believe that, they could deliver morbidity-free treatment and could do it to everyone, regardless of age or stage. And there were a few who, thought that maybe we didn't need to screen everyone, and maybe there was a little bit of over-treatment, maybe we've gone a little bit too far. But those voices were really suppressed in the 90s. Those voices didn't have a voice. And many of us also believe there was more morbidity to our treatment than we'd appreciated. And that was the milieu in which, us three, all young research physicians, probably all in our low 40s, were given the charge of this meeting. And the thing I most remember about it in the planning is that we actually decided collectively to give voice to everyone, including maverick voices. It wasn't just about the party line. And it wasn't just about the North American line. There were Brits and there were Swedes and there were Dutchmen who had very important things to say as well, and very, very different perspectives. And we also chose to give voice to young people as well as just, our party elders, so to speak. And the thing I think that was, I don't know which of us, if any of us, or maybe it was our society suggested, but we do it all in a single room, such that rad oncs and surgeons and medical were all together. And it led to a kind of forced truthfulness, which started to break down this group thing that we developed in our own silo. So when I look back, I think that context was very important, and that what we sought as young program chairs was that we sort of tapped into something that was latent in our fields. I mean, Eric Klein, I don't know if you remember things as I did.
I do. And things were very siloed then. We had hired early in the mid-90s, I think, a young radiation oncologist named Pat Kupelian, who became a close collaborator and a good friend, and who really changed the narrative around treating prostate cancer at the Cleveland Clinic, which was all surgical prior to that time. And he did such high-quality work, it was hard not to pay attention. And he actually took it on himself in his early years when he wasn't very busy to sit down and go through all the patients that we had treated with prostate cancer at the Cleveland Clinic, radiation versus surgery, and had the temerity to write a manuscript that showed that there was no difference in survival, based on PSA, biochemical recurrence and metastasis and that sort of thing. And that was sort of game-changing. And it really clued me into the fact that for patients' sake, we needed to be talking to our colleagues. The second perspective was from the perspective of having attended a couple of Prostate Cancer Foundation meetings. And I think they really deserve credit for increasing the visibility of prostate cancer research and funding it and recruiting really good scientists from other disciplines. When young scientists were told, and we heard this repeatedly, don't spend your career researching prostate cancer, it's a dead end. And PCF did a great job of having a multidisciplinary meeting, which was smaller and not so clinically focused, but also got me excited.
Yeah, I think you're right, Eric. And I think that, the transdisciplinary nature, as Anthony pointed out, was new, was innovative. No one had really thought about it. It was at the margins in different meetings. Your comments about PCF, Prostate Cancer Foundation, resonate because we did take a page from their book in many ways, although that meeting, as you point out, is much more basic research focused. I don't know if you guys recall that first year, in fact, PCF was a co-sponsor. We actually had asked Mike Milken to give a talk, and he did. And obviously, once we expanded to the broader GU cancers, it was less pertinent for PCF to be involved. But they absolutely, I agree with you, Eric, they deserve credit. PCF and the PCF involvement was one of the things that changed. There's many things that are constant, that haven't changed, even though the science clearly has evolved dramatically. And I'm wondering if you guys can comment on things that are the same. One thing that stands out for me, I had the opportunity to look through the agenda, for the 2005 meeting, and right there, very prominently, was a special lunch session that we had designed for mentorship and career development for trainees and early career investigators. And that's still ongoing, and others have modeled it. And I think that was one amazing feature of this. One of you, I think Anthony mentioned that we invited a lot of young people to speak and to be the path blazers, but we also did this career development piece. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful event. I wonder if either of you or both of you could comment on other things that you think are like constants and you anticipate will always be there.
I think for me, the constant is that every time I go, I hear speakers I've not heard before, often very senior speakers. I've never heard them before. But it is the practice of GU ASCO to invite people that are outside your sphere of experience, which is very challenging.
Two things strike me, I think. One is the international nature of the faculty. We tried very hard, and subsequent program directors have, to be very inclusive and to bring the work that was the most cutting edge to the stage. There are lots of things that are done in Europe that started there sooner. PSMA treatment, for example, and the PROTECT trial and many other things. And the debates on stage and how that gave the opportunity for every subspecialty to have the opportunity to share its perspective on particular case management issues. And case management conferences, I think, have been around forever. And maybe the most valuable part of it all is to hear people's perspective on how to manage a particular patient.
Yeah. I think the other comment you made, Anthony, that resonated and still goes on was it was a conscious decision to have a single session in one room where everyone attended and not to do the usual small breakouts and concurrent sessions, but sort of the philosophy being is we all need to hear the same thing. We all need to be in the same room at the same time. And it really fostered this transdisciplinary approach. And it was truly educational for us. Now it's sort of part of what we do and part of what our patients expect of us. But I think that bringing us all together into one room was really great.
But it's now so part of what we do that it's difficult, certainly for younger faculty and for residents, to believe we ever did it any other way.
Yeah.
But we did. And I don't know whether ASCO GU led that or it reflected that, but it was, that was the zeitgeist among young individuals like us. And it's really become the culture of contemporary practice.
So given that that's the culture now, which it is, and I think, sure, we should take credit for it, at least in GU, why then is it important for people to continue to attend GU ASCO today, if it's now our culture to do that?
For me, it's because we share information as equal partners in a multidisciplinary team. And our practice is so multidisciplinary and multimodality these days that we can't exist alone. We no longer try to.
Nor can we. The amount of knowledge that's being generated in each subspecialty and its spin-offs is so great. It's impossible for a busy surgeon to stay on top of that. And this is sort of one-stop shopping for everything that's really current and appropriate to know about. And again, I always look at these things from the patient perspective. And my ability to counsel patients about what their best treatment options might be, I thought more and more depended, and I think today more and more depends on being knowledgeable about everything that's going on and not just one narrow field that you happen to be an expert in. And that's why I think it's so important for youngsters to attend and even oldsters like us to attend to stay current.
Yeah. And also multidisciplinary means so much more these days. It does mean our pathologists and radiologists.
Yes, right.
Information technologists. Who knows what it'll mean in the future. But it's always expanding.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, back when we did this, when we started it, we were worried about being able to fill, one meeting with prostate cancer information. We did easily. It was not immediately clear that there was a role or room for additional GU cancers. And then there was an explosion, both in kidney cancer work at first and then bladder cancer. And now it's unbelievable how much is there. And, perhaps this meeting needs to be twice as long. So I agree with you guys. I think that it's the best way to stay current. The other thing that I really appreciate about this meeting, and others have a hard time doing it, is that it provides for as Eric indicated, for the busy clinician, it integrates sort of the important information that's coming in terms of more basic science and makes it readily available and digestible, which isn't always the case at pure science meetings and may or may not be apparent in other meetings. I, again, was looking at the preliminary agenda. In 2005, we had asked Bill Nelson to talk about molecular targets for prevention.
Wow.
How forward thinking, right? And that's continued to be the case, that this is a meeting where you get that integration from the laboratory.
Well, and I would add to that, not just the integration of it's where now you get to hear things first.
Yes.
I mean, it used to be that you went to the AUA or ASTRO or ASCO to hear things. No, now everyone wants to present it first at GU ASCO.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think we actually made it permissible in the early days that you could present at GU ASCO and at your specialty meeting.
What are the challenges in the field that are going to likely shape the content of future meetings? And we've all alluded to the fact that the meeting is evolving and has done a really good job of staying current with the clinical science. But beyond that, what do you two feel are important areas that this meeting is likely to continue to address?
So biomarker development has always been an important part of this meeting, and I think we need to broaden our view of what biomarkers are now. And in the AI era, digital pathology and AI-based models that predict treatment response and outcome, my hope is that they will be studied in a rigorous fashion and that they will end up outperforming the kind of single biomarker approach that we've used in the past. And we need to understand that. We need to understand the science behind AI to a certain level. And we need to understand what questions AI can address and how that might be useful. But I'm particularly excited about digital pathology, where sampling error becomes less of an issue, and the number of potential inputs you're looking at that are related to the output should increase exponentially.
Yeah, and I would add, on the AI side of things, as a former journal editor, when AI papers came into the journal, we actually didn't have enough people who could review them, who had the understanding to review these papers and tell us, is this a good paper or bad? So we're going to need to increase our understanding of AI, Eric, as you said. So I think that will be a push in the years to come. I'll also add, on a very practical level, it is such a popular meeting. Keeping us all under one roof and in one room will become just difficult. But it's part of the culture of the meeting. And I think it's what people want.
It's a good challenge to have.
Yeah.
And feeding everybody, too. I recall one constant has always been really good breakfasts and lunches.
Right. That has been a standard of ours. One of the interesting things that I think has changed, we saw glimmers of it back in 2005, but it was early on, and it was, I think, very early on in sort of a good understanding of social determinants of health and equitable access to healthcare and the challenges posed by incredible technology development and making sure that that doesn't increase disparities. And I think that focus has increasingly been present in meetings and is not going to be lost. And it also speaks, one of you spoke to, our international audience, that increasingly I think this meeting is going to address urologic oncology and how we address it, not only in developed countries, but in lower and middle income countries. And I think that will be a focus as well. I'm excited with what the future holds for ASCO GU. It has been an incredible run. I'm hoping that we'll be able to perhaps catalog some of the salient presentations that have been done at this meeting over the years, but there's no question, as both of you have pointed out, this has become the venue. Well, thank you both for sharing your insights with us today on the ASCO Daily News Podcast. Really wonderful to see you both and talk with you.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Great to be here. Looking forward to the next 20 years.
That's right.
If I'm still around.
Yeah, let's do this again in 20 years. That'd be great.
We will. And thank you to our listeners for your time today. If you value the insights that you hear on the ASCO Daily News Podcast, please take a moment to rate and review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
The purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform. This is not a substitute for professional medical care and is not intended for use in the diagnosis or treatment of individual conditions. Guests on this podcast express their own opinions, experience, and conclusions. Guest statements on the podcast do not express the opinions of ASCO. The mention of any product, service, organization, activity, or therapy should not be construed as an ASCO endorsement.